Hello, everybody. Welcome back to Human Nutrition and Lifestyle Podcast. Today on the podcast, we've got Dorian Soanes with us, and Dorian Soanes is a nutritionalist. So I'll get him to introduce himself and let him tell us all about him, what he does, and where he's from. So welcome, Dorian.
Hi there, I'm Matthew. So yeah, I'm a nutritionist and I'm training the functional medicine model. I'm working mostly with clients who have autoimmunity or histamine issues or gut issues. That's probably like 80% of my work now. And I'm helping them to dramatically improve, or in some cases, completely reverse their symptoms, reverse their condition. And I'm based in Farnham in Surrey in the UK, but most of my clients now are international. So I have clients from, I cover actually all time zones from at the moment from New Zealand all the way to California. So most of my clients are not based in the UK. So yeah, that's me.
So what actually got you into it in the first place then, Dorian? Have you got did you grow up with it? Have you got a backstory, or did you just fall into it?
No, not at all. No. So I've been doing this for 5 or 6 years now, and I'm 41. So I had a sort of 15 years in industry doing something completely different. I was a ship broker. That's so I was like, which is not a ship broker, although some people might say I was. So it was that's like real estate for ships, right? So you sell a ship and you take a commission on that. And as a kid, I was kind of into health and fitness through rugby. I used to play rugby as a kid, when I was 18 and in university as well. And it was all like protein shakes and creatine, that sort of thing for nutrition, combined with weight training. Outside of that, I didn't really think about it. As a shipbroker, I took absolutely no interest in nutrition whatsoever, and actually my lifestyle was completely different from how it is now. And in my sort of early mid-30s, when I was around 32, I started to feel pretty crappy. And I just had my first child. I was living in Singapore actually at the time, and I just had my first child. And it was shortly after that we moved back here in 2012, I think it was, to start a business here in shipping still. And I just noticed that I felt really crappy most of the time. To the point where it was actually really debilitating. The worst symptoms for me were fatigue, and also like I was having really bad anxiety and insomnia. And eventually, after months of this, I went to the doctor and they ran a few tests, and they said, you've got an overactive thyroid. I had absolutely no idea that meant at the time. I was referred to an endocrinologist, went through the whole thing, and they said you had Graves' disease. It's an autoimmune disease that your immune system's attacking your thyroid. There's nothing you can do about it. We're going to give you some medications, and then eventually you're going to have your thyroid ablated with radioactive iodine, or you're going to have to get it cut out. So the diagnosis really shook me, actually, because this horrible, getting told this horrible thing that basically your body's attacking itself. We don't know why, it just is, and there's nothing really you can do about it. So I did everything the endocrinologist said. I was a model patient, really. And actually, my thyroid blood tests normalized, but I still felt like total crap. I still had massive anxiety. I still had horrendous insomnia, which was, if anyone's watching this who has had insomnia, is the absolute worst. At my worst, there were times where I went weeks and I felt like I was sleeping maybe 1 or 2 hours a night. So I didn't know if it was day or night at this point. It was really, really horrendous. And it was obviously affecting my life in terms of my my work. I wasn't working much at this point. It was affecting my family. I have a wife and my oldest son. And it was a year of going through this. And then they said, right, well, you're not getting better, so we better chop out your thyroid or do radioactive iodine to ablate it. And it just I didn't know anything about medicine or nutrition. It just didn't sound right to me that you would chop out a body part. And that's when I started to research alternatives, and I came across functional medicine, and that sent me on a path of I actually did work with a practitioner at the time, who I still know to this day. But it sent me a path on my own research about diet and lifestyle. And to cut a very long story short, I dramatically improved. I completely normalized my thyroid. And I'm now 5-6 years, I haven't had a problem with my thyroid. And really, it was that experience that, like, I was like, I can't believe that we're telling people this stuff. No one knows about this. And I started researching this nutrition more than I was doing my own job. And I thought, I'm extremely passionate about this. I want to do this and help other people in similar positions to me. So I went and got a master's. I got a master's in personalized nutrition. I got a diploma, a nutritional therapy diploma to practice, registered with BANT and CNHC, and that's it. That kind of brings you up to speed without the sort of ins and outs and how I did it.
No, that's brilliant. That's absolutely great. And similar to a lot of people that I've spoken to in the past as well, it's so unfortunate that you have to go out there and find out that your own research and go down your own path to work out what's best for yourself. We're not being told these kind of things from our professionals who we trust. We should be able to trust professionals. And I mean, so extreme as your case being that it was to the fact where you was going to get a body part chopped out, that it helped you to turn to nutrition and figure out there must be another way. Surely we've got to think about searching nutrition first, search lifestyle and nutrition choices first before we think about chopping out body parts. And anybody who's in similar sort of positions, perhaps not as extreme, but have autoimmune diseases or gut problems or anything, always look for nutritional and lifestyle choices first. Never go to the extremes that some people can go. I mean, you may have to. Some people do require surgery and you may have to go down that route, but there's nothing wrong with saying, like yourself did, let me just have a look, see if there's another way. Let me see if I can do something with nutrition and lifestyle choices first. And was it purely the fact that you thought, right, I'm just going to go against the guidelines, I'm going to change everything all in one go? Or did you maybe take like a little bit of a more step-by-step approach?
I actually went in. So, I mean, I can tell you that I started joining Facebook forums when I was diagnosed. And there were a few people in there who would say things like, diet can make a massive difference. And I always used to just think, what a load of bollocks. And I remember when I was really desperate, I actually asked my endocrinologist, listen, I've read some people saying cutting out gluten or something. Is that going to make a difference? And he said, no, what a load of rubbish. That is complete pseudoscience. Stay away from that. And that kept me away from it for another, say, 8 months until, it was literally about, I was looking at staring down the barrel of having my thyroid out or ablated and basically buying myself time. I started to look into it myself, and I went full in. I just went full in straight away. I'm a pretty disciplined guy, so I found it quite easy. Right, once I made the decision to go into it, and that was it, really.
So you say you went full in. What does that mean? Does that mean that you took out all processed food?
So I'll tell you, my journey was the first thing I read was just from a recommendation was Mark Sisson's The Primal Blueprint. And that's basically an introduction to effectively a paleo diet, right? And so I read that book, and it's really, if anyone's read it, it's a great introduction. It's a really well-written book. It's entertaining. It keeps you reading. And so I did that. I literally just said, okay, right, I'm going to go in for this, and instantly felt better, right? Within weeks, I would say I felt better. I started applying he talks about other principles. I think he says like, lift heavy weights, sprint, sleep. So I basically applied those principles and I instantly felt better. Now, it wasn't a complete cure. There were other things I did along the way and other things I experimented with, definitely with diet. I'm in a constant flux with experimenting with my own diet actually, but I think I've worked out pretty well what, generally speaking, what works with other people. And there is an individual difference there. But that was what I went into. It was like a fairly strict paleo diet to begin with, and the lifestyle recommendations from that, which is sort of lift heavy things, which I was into anyway, sprinting, and then also managing your sleep and stress management as well, like mindfulness. I got into mindfulness pretty heavily.
That's great. And I love the way that you tell us about your story. You're really driven and you're really focused and you really went for it. The thing is that I work with a lot of people who like to toe tap, let me just put my toe in, see how this is.
Yeah.
I have worked with people who are driven and really go for it. And then you can set them something like a carnivore diet straight off. They jump into it and really grab onto it. But there's the 90%, 80 to 90% of people are more toe tapping people, which I would call, and would say, look, I can't do what you've done, basically. I can't just go for it. What can I do as a beginner, as somebody listening on the peripheries of this video, thinking, oh, is it for me? Are these guys talking? What can they do to potentially help themselves have a better lifestyle and bring in a better nutrition to their lifestyle?
Yeah, so 100%, I completely agree with you. And that's been a learning experience for me, is that not many people are exactly the same as me, and that's fine. I'm probably a bit A-type and a bit obsessive, which is also a downside in many ways. So my recommendation is with specific to nutrition. I mean, I run a 12-week program, so I take people through very small steps on each week. But the first step is basically, I don't take anything away from their diet. I just add to it. And I'll specifically add protein. So animal protein specifically, not any other kind of, not plant protein. So animal protein. We're going to track where you are now, right? We're going to set an ideal amount, and you're going to work up to that ideal amount of protein, which for most people is going to be 130, 140 grams for females, 180, maybe 160, 180 grams for males, right? You're going to work up to that amount, and you're going to keep working up to that amount until you get to a level that's comfortable, the maximum that's comfortable, right? Now you know what that looks like, right? And you can do that every day, 3 times a day. Right, that's what what it looks like on your plate, and there you go. That's your protein, and now we'll work on the next thing. So doing that, and that way you don't take. And honestly, as an intervention, getting your close to 1 gram per pound or 2 grams per kilo, close to that from animal protein, that's massive, right? You've now got balanced blood sugar, right? Your blood sugar is now basically balanced most of the time. You're going to feel more energy. You're probably going to sleep better. Some people notice instant gut symptom reliefs. Basically, you are using amino acids as signaling molecules for abundance, is what I like to say, right? You're now a good hunter, or you're in a tribe of good hunters. That's what your body is now registering, right? Rather than being depleted, because we've got no good mechanism for storing amino acids, right? We can store energy as fat, no problem. We can store amino acids as muscle, but we don't want to break that down really. We're in a catabolic state when we want to break it down. And most of my clients are in a totally catabolic state. I want them to be in the opposite, right? So just doing that is really low hanging fruit, and it's fantastic. And then once they've seen the improvements from that, generally they're sold on diet. So when it comes to, if we do need to make more tweaks that we do with some people about taking stuff out, it's a much easier conversation, because they see the difference that made. How much difference can we make if we take some out? And for other people, actually, it's obvious. I mean, I just came off a call just now, actually, with a client who gluten in specific really screws them up. So it's, once you show them that there's a life without that, it's quite easy for them to follow, because it's just not worth it, right?
I love the way you do that, and you just say, look, let's just add something in, and especially protein as well, because I'm all about keeping things simple. And when you have a conversation with somebody who knows nothing about nutrition, then if you try and complicate things too much, you've lost them straight away in the first sentence. So if you can say something like, just add animal protein in, add lots of it, add as much as you can eat, basically, to get full. If you can do that, then what you tend to find anyway is that they get so satiated that they don't even eat the other things that they were having in their nutrition, like the breads and the pastas and the things that they thought was filling them up. That doesn't tend to happen, because protein tends to come along with fat anyway. So then that helps you to be satiated. And it also comes along with all the nutrients and all the vitamins and minerals that your body needs and requires. And a lot of being satiated, being full, a lot of that comes from the nutrients that you get. If your body's happy with the amount of nutrients and the kind of nutrients that it's getting, then it won't tend to send you too many hunger signals. So although protein and fat are good, they keep you satiated, also you need all the nutrient density that comes with it. And that tends to be found in animal protein. I like the way you emphasize animal protein. maybe we can emphasize a bit more on animal protein, say why is this animal protein and why are we not turning to plant protein, which in the media they'll have you believe is better.
Yeah, well, it's just animal protein. So it's the most bioavailable, right? That's extremely clear in the literature. There's no real debate on that. In terms of the amino acids that get into your bloodstream, it's the most bioavailable, and it's the easiest to digest. It's what your digestive tract is designed to break down. It's designed to break down, animal protein into the constituent amino acids that we then go and do stuff in our body with our detoxification, our immune system, whatever it is. The thresholds of essential amino acids are just so much lower in plant protein. To have the same effects, you have to eat that much more. And anyone who has an autoimmunity or a digestive issue will tell you what's going to happen if you eat a buttload of lentils. You're going to look like you're 6 months pregnant, right? I haven't yet really, when people have an issue digesting animal protein, which happens, the first thing I think is low stomach acid. And that's actually pretty easy to fix. You can use supplements as well as other stuff so they can get their stomach acid tapping up their parasympathetic nervous system so they get their own stomach acid going eventually. But even just with the use of supplements, we can take that away almost straight away, right? Betaine HCl, you can start with a very low dose if they can't tolerate a high dose. So I don't have people have the same issues with animal protein as they would with plant protein, which is basically definitely superior for making farts and not really superior for much else as far as I can see. It's also the sheer volume. When you take chickpeas or lentils, right, or beans, right, it's not just protein. That actually a percentage of protein is not actually relatively high in that food. You have to eat a massive volume of that food, which also includes carbohydrates and the fibers and stuff that's going to give you gas. So to get 1 gram on, I've actually looked at this, to get 1 gram on like a vegan diet, let's say the extreme, you take a plant-based, a vegan diet, it's the amount, the volume, 1 gram per pound of body weight, the volume you have to eat is almost insurmountable. It's impossible. And I really think that actually, really, we should be going for that. Well, I know that I think it's 0.6 to 0.8 grams is what you need for muscle building, right? But what I observe clinically, this isn't just about muscle building. It's the constant supply of amino acids that really contributes to you getting healthier and improving your outcomes. So it's almost impossible to do on a plant-based diet. And if you have digestive issues, gut issues, which most of my clients do to some degree, that just ain't happening. You're fermenting food, you're feeding bacteria, you're not feeding yourself.
Yeah, well, I think that's great to say you're feeding bacteria, and that bacteria then ends up causing the digestive issues, which the fiber and things just live on in your gut. And I think what's important to say is that, especially everybody I've worked with, I don't know if it's the same what you've worked with, is some people will say to follow the guidelines of 0.8, 0.6 grams or 1 gram per pound of body weight and all that. But instead of counting numbers, because lots of people won't want to go away and won't want to count numbers, like we said earlier, just eat the protein until you're full. There's nobody that I've worked with that's overeaten protein and has a problem with it. You can't really, you can overeat protein, but when you're coming from a background of processed food and lots of carbohydrates and things, switching over to a protein kind of heavy nutrition that you probably feel like, don't feel like you have to count every gram that goes in. Don't think that you have to have the scales there measuring each day. You've got to have this amount of macros, that amount of macros. Sure. Just prioritize your protein. Go for it. Don't. If you're listening to this and you're thinking I'm having too much protein, you're probably not, because I've yet to work with anybody who has said, "Look, I can't work with this. I'm having too much protein," and has not been able to aim for whatever goal it is they want, weight loss or performance or whatever.
No, I totally agree with that. And when I track protein with my clients, I'm not only tracking protein, not other calories, and the purpose is not to do that forever. It's to do it for 2 weeks, and then they have in their mind what it looks like, which roughly like that much protein, your whole hand on a plate 3 times a day. That's roughly what it looks like, right? To put it in layman's terms, and then you're going to be golden. That's basically going to be it. I've experimented with myself where I've eaten 400 grams of protein a day, and I got very warm, interestingly, which
Yeah.
that's what I noticed with the thermic effect of food. But there's also studies like I don't know if you're familiar with Jose Antonio, who did protein overfeeding studies. He did protein overfeeding studies in athletic aged males who were already on a high protein diet. So these guys were getting close to 200 grams of protein a day anyway. So there was a control group who were unchanged. One group did 100 grams more protein on top, and there was another group that 200 grams more protein on top, and they saw what happened, right? And if you feed those, if you do exactly the same experiment but with carbs and fats, we know what happens, right? We know what happens. But with protein, nothing happened, except the higher protein group said that they found extremely satiated, and it was really hard to eat enough protein to get the, and they felt very warm as well because of the thermic effect of food. So, but no, it's almost impossible to eat too much protein because your body will turn off its hunger signals. It just won't do it. So yeah, very difficult.
Yeah, that's great. And like I say, a lot of people are scared of it when you mention, especially probably more women than men, when you
100%.
say, to eat more protein and eat more fats, then kind of puts them off. But there, in retrospect, when you look at studies like that, you can see that, it doesn't do you any harm to have extra protein. If you are struggling with, even if you're struggling with fats, then go to protein, have extra protein. But let's talk about fats as well. We talked
Yeah.
about animal protein. So let's
Yeah.
talk about fats.
Yeah.
Why do we often say to people, look at your fats macro when you weighing up your macros, carbs, proteins, and fats, that they're macronutrients. When we're trying to change somebody from a carbohydrate heavy processed food nutrition, why do we often switch over and say, make sure you're eating plenty of fats?
Yeah. Well, I mean, I think first of all, if you're going to be eating your best sources of animal protein, you're going to be eating fat, right? Short of eating chicken breast all day long, which would be really miserable, and it would be almost impossible as well, right? You're going to be getting plenty of fats, because I think when we look at sources of protein, if we're looking at it from a nutritional point of view, in terms of what's going to give us the biggest bang for our buck nutritionally, organ meats aside, is going to be red meat, right? That's going to give us the bang for your buck. So you're going to be getting fats with your protein, and animal fats, again, animal fats are extremely nourishing. They carry essential nutrients like vitamin D, vitamin K2, retinol, right? Retinol, which you cannot get from plants. You cannot get retinol from plants. I'm a big vitamin A guy, actually, because vitamin A is like the vitamin no one really talks about. And vitamin A regulates your cell division. It regulates your immune system. So being sufficient in vitamin A is a big deal, right? You are absolute, the amount of sweet potato, which I think is the most concentrated vitamin A plant food you need to eat. It's like 2 pounds of sweet potato a day or something. So good luck doing that to get enough from beta carotene. I think 40% of people have a genetic SNP where they can only make so much vitamin retinol from beta carotene anyway. So, and most of those people are Northern European. So they basically have got rid of the ability to make their vitamin A from plants, or reduce their ability to make vitamin A from plants. So that's why you'd want animal fats. I mean, it comes together. We're reductionist in the fact that we're talking about this separately, but obviously it's a package. Animal protein and animal fat come together. The big thing with animal fat over the last 60 years, or however many it's been, is the whole lipid diet heart hypothesis, which actually originally turned people off all fats. There's a massive question marks around why we should be doing that, and it's all related to how saturated fat and its effect on your LDL. Cholesterol has no effect on your LDL. And there's I personally have massive question marks around that whole method. But again, clinically, what do I see? If I tell people to eat more meat, specifically red meat, things like red meat and eggs, what happens? Does their autoimmune disease or gut health or histamine issues, do they get better or worse? They get better. Almost unanimously, they get better. So as a clinician, that is what I'm interested in.
Yeah, brilliant. I love the way you put it. I just want to kind of summarize it a bit for people who are listening.
Yeah.
And I just want everybody to understand the fact that you have to swap over to fat. You have to have this fat into your nutrition. Like you say, animal fat. If you're eating good amounts of protein, you get the animal fat with you, because generally when you're eating a high carbohydrate diet, you're constantly fueling on the sugar all the time. I've talked about the sugar roller coaster on the podcast a lot. Everybody knows if you're having lots of sugar highs, then you have a low. But we want to try and give you the same energy, but for it to be stabilized throughout the day. And that's why we introduce higher fat percentages in a program or a nutrition plan that you will get set if you try and change your nutrition, or even if you're doing it yourself and you're making those smarter choices, then you're already listening to us, upping your protein. Don't be scared of those fats as well. Cook with butter. Make sure you introduce plenty of fat, because your energy's got to come from somewhere. You like we mentioned earlier, you don't want to be breaking down the proteins. You don't want to be breaking down the amino acids. I've talked about gluconeogenesis before, which, yes, you can break down the proteins for your energy, but really we don't want to be doing that. So we want a source of energy, and that could come from the fat. Now, everybody's going to be different, and everybody's going to have a different goal. If your goal is weight loss, then you may be able to survive on the fat you've already got on your body. So you might not need as high amounts of fat as some keto programs and some internet programs say. You've got to have super high amounts of fat in your coffee. You've got to put a slice of lard in your coffee and everything. You may not need that if that goal is to lose lots of fat off your body, because you can tap in and use that. But you will need some external energy to add into your nutrition. And just before we move on, to touch on that vitamin A as well, there's loads of different kind of vitamins and minerals within plants that our bodies just cannot break down. And the plants make it a lot harder for your body to break down as well. You touched on beta carotene, which is vitamin A in the plant form. And it's so hard we can convert it into retinol, which our body can use, but it is so hard and it gives our body a problem. So they're the digestive issues that you're probably experiencing from that, is your body struggling really hard to convert enough of that vitamin A to give it to you in animal form, which is the retinol, which you mentioned. And there's loads of other ones which go down a similar path as well. So that's why you say introducing red meat and eggs and animal produce into people's nutrition is, in a way, it kind of just resets the body, brings it back to where we need to be. And in nutritional terms as well, gives us all those nutrients and all those vitamins and all those minerals that we require to thrive on.
100%. Yeah, totally.
So is there something that can go along with nutrition then as well? We're trying to get people over to a more whole foods based diet, but it's not just about nutrition. That's why I'm all about a nutritional lifestyle, because you can still 100% bulletproof your nutrition, but if other things within your life are not great, then it may not work as well as you expect. What other kind of things can we touch on?
No, that's absolutely right. And I think, and actually that's a big mistake that I see people making, is that they'll sometimes go headlong into a diet and then they won't see the results. And though there might be, maybe there's certain things we can pick apart their diet that they're not doing right, it's not just diet. There are people out there who change the diet and then miracles happen. It's not everywhere. Obviously, the massive ones that I consider is stress. So I'd say stress resilience, right? We don't want to eliminate stress from our lives. It's not desirable, because if you don't experience the lows, you can't experience the highs. That's part of the human experience. But resilience to stress, movement is obviously massive, and then sleep, right? Which everyone listening to this will agree, right? Everyone's had a bad night's sleep. How you feel after a bad night's sleep is a completely different world to how you feel after a good night's sleep, right? So if we can work on those things, that's what I would consider to be the whole picture. But stress resilience is a big one, because it's so all encompassing. Like it's your relationship with your own mind, as well as your mind's relationship with its environment, right? Which is everything. That's the difficult person at work, right? Or troublesome relationships with your family and stuff like that. These are all signaling to our mind a lack of safety, right? And with so many things, like your brain is the master control center of your body, and it does that through your nervous system, right? Your central nervous system. So your brain detects what environment you're in, and that is carried out by your nerves, right? And your nervous system can either prioritize functions that it thinks it needs to survive because it's in a dangerous environment, a non-safe environment, or it can carry out functions that it thinks it needs to survive because it's in a safe environment, right? And those two things are completely different. We can be anabolic, we can make sex hormones because we're in a safe place to make babies, right? Or we can prioritize anabolic hormones like sex hormones because we don't mind if we've got a bit of extra muscle because we're in a safe, abundant environment, right? And we can regulate our digestion because we've got loads of food to eat, so we want to do that. Or we can just prioritize anxious thoughts in our brain because that's actually a survival mechanism. Anxious thoughts is you trying to anticipate danger. That's what anxiety is. We can prioritize catabolism, breaking down tissue for energy, because we're not going to be eating much. We're in a scarce environment, so we need to create our own energy. And things like getting your muscles ready to go and stuff like that. So your nervous system's control of your body is almost entirely down to the environment that your brain perceives it's in. And there's so much to that. So that's why I say stress resilience is actually a massive piece. Movement and sleep is kind of easy. We can not easy to fix necessarily, but easy to work out. But the stress resilience piece is a very broad thing.
It is, yeah. And how can, on a daily basis, on a weekly basis, how can people, because there may be people listening there thinking, oh yeah, I've got plenty of stress, I'm really resilient to stress, it's not a problem. But we're not talking about chronic stress, we're not talking about stress all of the time. We're talking about acute stress, stresses that we can deal with a short amount of times but are quite intense. So what kind of things can people do in their daily lives to be more resilient to stress by adding in these acute stresses?
Yeah, I mean, yeah. So acute stressors so things that make you more resilient to stress are acute stressors, right? Lifting heavy weights, for example, is an acute stressor. A cold shower is an acute stressor, right? These things all make you far more resilient to stress. If you deadlift a shed load of weight, right, your body is more resilient to stress by definition. If you have the struggle like I do in my mind every morning, I don't want to get in that shower, but you do, you're making yourself more resilient to stress. So those activities, that's why it's hard to separate these things out into again, we're being a bit reductionist, and that's not how things work. If your sleep's better, you're more resilient to stress. If you optimize your movement, you're more resilient to stress. In terms of practices that can make you more resilient to stress, lifting heavy weights is a really good one. The thing with movement is there's a very individual dose response there. I've worked with people who are in their 20s and very athletic, and I've also worked with like 90-year-old diabetics, and obviously the movement program for those two people looks very different, right? With a 90-year-old, I'm working on, can you get up from a chair without your hands, right? And if you can, he's more resilient now. He is now stronger than he was. But in terms of chronic stress, that's where I think the dangers of pathology come on. So the persistent signaling from your environment, or your brain signaling to its body that you're in a state of constant survival, that is what biases your hormones one way, biases your bodily function one way, and that is what builds up over time, so that when people in their 30s, 40s, and 50s, because that's usually when these things happen, they sort of have a collapse in their health and they've got an autoimmunity or something. That is generally I think that's what happened to me, and that's generally tends to be what happens to other people. And I mean, a really obvious example is, I touched on it earlier, when your body believes it's in an environment, a stressful environment, right? Our body doesn't understand money, family, doesn't understand supermarkets. It understands scarcity and abundance. That's the language it talks in, right? So when it's in stress, it thinks scarcity. We're not going to be eating food. Your gut, taken as one, mouth to anus, is the second most energy hungry organ, if we think of it, one organ in your body after your brain, right? So it titrates all those resources away from your digestive system, puts it into things to help you survive, right? You now have no gut function. You've now got low stomach acid, you've got low digestive enzymes, your bile secretion is bad, you don't have any peristalsis, and yet you're still eating. So you're introducing food into this environment that doesn't want food. So what happens? You don't break down your food properly. Okay, the food sits there, It doesn't. You start to get overgrowths of bacteria. You start to get bloating. You get diarrhea or constipation with it, and that is typically. And then all of your gut, your relationship between your gut and your immune system, 70 to 80% of your immune system outside your small intestines. You get overgrowths in your gut. You're dinging your immune system constantly, right? That's when immune issues start to happen. So that's why I think the chronic stress piece is the one that's very more difficult for people to deal with. But definitely with the acute stresses, we can build in acute stresses that make you more resilient to chronic stresses. That's definitely correct.
Yeah, I think in nutrition terms, they just touched on it with your digestion. That's why it's so important to have periods of not eating as well, because then it gives your gut and it gives your immune system chance to work out what's going on, chance to repair anything that needs to be repaired as well. And it's not being constantly bombarded with things it needs to deal with the whole time, just to try and break it down into its simplest form. And I know there's a lot more to it than that. But
sure.
For beginners, you've got to really understand why were you telling me to fast? Why are you telling me not to eat? It's to bring you in to a stress that's not a chronic stress, to bring you back to somewhere that your body can basically reset again. When I sell my programs, I often say the reset programs, and that's what we try and do, is reset everything using things like you mentioned, like acute stressors, and using good nutrition as well.
100%.
And sleep. Like you say, you can't touch on sleep enough. Sleep is so very important. I know myself at the moment, I've got a 1-month-old, so
congratulations.
Yeah, so sleep is like gold dust around here.
Yes.
But you can certainly tell the difference. So you just have to try your very best to do it. But you mentioned about training in the gym, building muscle. That is something that I often try and tell people. If you want to live long, if your aim is longevity, you need to build muscle. Because muscle is the thing that's going to stop you falling over when you get older. Muscle is, everybody goes out there and tries to do as much cardio as they like, running around the block. I mean, doing whatever they can, but it's the building of the muscle. And that also, not only does it help prevent falls and ailments when you get older, but it's also important for your hormones as well.
Yes. Yeah. Speaking my language, you really are. So like that is a big part of what I do with my clients, right? Whether, some of them deliberately come to me because they know that, others don't, but we're still kind of working on that. I'm absolutely not anti-cardio. I think cardio though is abused. Cardio is the first thing people think of when it comes to fitness. And, I'm going to go back in shape. It's January. I'm going to go for a 10K run, right? People don't respect cardio. And like most people, they run, their biomechanics is terrible, right? And they push themselves to a place where they're really tired. It's the same as, no one would say, I haven't worked out for a while, I'm going to go and do a 2 times body weight squat, right? No one's going to say that, right? They probably wouldn't be able to do it anyway, but it is the equivalent of that. People seem to respect weights more than they respect running, which is just this thing you can throw in. But actually, when you go for a run, like a 10K run for an hour, you're elevating your stress hormones and you're keeping them elevated there. And the message you're sending to your body is one that needs to be more efficient, right? So your body now has to adapt by becoming more efficient, which is not beneficial to your weight loss goal, if that is your goal. Because now you sit around all day in a hyper-palatable food environment where we have abundant food, right? And your body is trying to be more efficient with its calories, which is the opposite of what you want to do. But longevity, 100%, so that's very clear in the literature, right? There's no biomarker that holds up to strength in particular in over 60s of who's going to live the longest. Okay, and when I see people, all of them are weaker than they should be and under muscled because we have these sedentary lives that are relatively weak. The beauty of this is if we just look at this from a high level and we just say, right, we're going to what can we do to make you as strong as possible? We can optimize your protein. We can get you lifting heavy weights, right? Along with that, everything is going to improve, right? Everything is going to improve because all of a sudden now you're calling on demand for sex hormones to make you stronger. You're increasing your metabolism. The relationship between your brain, your nervous system, and your metabolism, your brain believes as your metabolism goes up, you're in an environment of abundance. So I see people who get stronger and all of a sudden they feel warmer and all this other stuff. You know, they start to sleep better through the night. They've got better blood glucose regulation, and their immune symptoms, their autoimmune symptoms, or their histamine symptoms start to subside. You know, we now like we muscle is, we look at it as an endocrine organ, right? It signals to the I think it's called the cytokine that my muscles release, if I'm right, is myokines.
That's right.
Myokines, which literally signal to your immune system, and they balance your immune system. They're anti-cancer. So we should all, like, the one thing often is, like, I don't want to look, especially female clients as well, I don't want to look muscular. I don't want to look big. So unless you know, most people aren't genetic freaks, right? Most people find it pretty difficult to build a significant amount of muscle not on exogenous hormones, right? And you know, I've been training my nuts off now for the best part of like almost 25 years, right? So if you find the secret to building a lot of muscle instantly, please let me know. It's just not going to happen. It really is just not going to happen. Even for guys, like, you know, I've been training so long now. I am the same weight now. I started training when I was 15, and I put on a relatively large amount of muscle quite quickly. I was going through puberty, so my testosterone would have been very high, and that was it. I'm the same weight now as I was when I was 18, and I've constantly been trying to get stronger and build muscle. It's just not, it just doesn't work like that. So so cardio is not the optimal for fat loss, which seems to be the thing. That's definitely not the case. And I do think that cardio in some people contributes to problems, notably gut problems, and eventually other stuff down the line, which all starts in the gut anyway.
Yeah, and no, I think it's important for people to understand that more muscle equals more fat loss.
That's exactly right.
So it's not the case of, you know, doing more cardio. Cardio is great for cardiovascular health. That's
100%.
That's it. You know, that it ends there. The
Yes.
rest of your body is, you know, if you want to lose weight, your goal is to build strength. And we're not talking about, I know you mentioned lifting heavy weights, and that kind of scares people off, but we're not talking about lifting the heaviest weight you possibly can. We're talking about doing a push-up, you know, doing a pull-up on a bar, you know, your own personal strength is what we're talking about. We don't want you to look like Arnold Schwarzenegger at all. We just want you to be stronger, or to feel that you're able to do things a lot better with more strength.
That's right.
In yourself. And I've worked with people like laborers, builders, carrying things, and just simply by changing the nutrition so that their metabolism becomes faster and better, they often report back, they say, I feel stronger.
Yes.
You know, it's not the fact that I've given any extra weights to lift in the gym or anything like that. They're still going ahead and doing their own, obviously they're active, they're lifting things up ladders and things, but they're just getting stronger. They can feel themselves. The nutrition's helped with that, and they're doing their activities as well. So you don't have to go mad and fill yourself full of a 5-week, 7-week gym program. In fact, I would say, you know, a couple of days a week is probably all you need, even if you are somebody who is a cardio athlete. And I am one of those. I do endurance activity, triathlons, biking, swimming, running. But I really respect the fact that I'm not going to get the best out of myself unless I strength train, because the strength is what gets you over the finish line. For anybody who's a runner or a biker, anything, it's not the time you spend. Well, you know, you've got to spend the time doing those activities, but the thing that's going to get you over the finish line strong is the strength, and you need to have that.
Yeah, that's exactly right. And just to say, when I say heavy weights, it's relative, because absolute strength is not what's actually important. You know, everyone starts at a different baseline for absolute strength and has a different genetic potential. The important thing is getting stronger. It's the act of becoming stronger. So back to the 90-year-old diabetic I was telling you about, we got benefit, the kind of benefits we're talking about, from him by taking him from being able to stand with having to use his hands to not using his hands. Okay, so it's absolute strength. So he still wasn't very strong compared to someone who's a younger guy, but because he got stronger, that was the benefit. And that is actually that is the wonder of strength training as well, is you don't need to do that much. And some of the results are semi-permanent. That's the other crazy thing, because we know now about like muscle memory and everything like that. So you can take like 3 months off and you'll be back to where you were within a couple of weeks, even if it took you a couple of years to get to that point. So yeah, that's my general recommendation is twice a week, actually. Just do some 30 minutes, 45 minutes, big compound lifts, right? That's all you need to do. I mean, if you want to take it really far, you never need to do more than 3 or 4 times a week in the gym. And to endurance athletes, I say like Mo Farah is actually really strong. In his off season, he focuses on strength training, right? Strength is the fundamental, is your foundational fitness above everything else. That's your foundation. And then you build the house on top of that. So whatever your goal is, you should have strength. Doesn't mean, you know, obviously at some point it doesn't become an advantage to get stronger, but you should be relatively strong. When someone is so frail that they can't get out of bed, or so sick they can't get out of bed, it's not their cardiovascular system that's stopping them from doing that. It's their strength. That's why strength is foundational. You need strength to walk, right? And then you can build everything else on top of that.
Yeah, yeah. It's so important to say, if you are an athlete out there listening and you haven't got strength in your program and in whatever you're doing, then you need to add that in. It's why potentially some athletes out there get a lot more injuries and illnesses than the others, because they're not focusing on enough protein for one in their nutrition, and they're not focusing on enough strength in their program. So if you're listening to this, you think, well, I'm always injured, you know, perhaps try that. You know, I'm not saying it's the be all and end all, but it's something to try. And anecdotally, we see that more than not. It works more than not. So that's the thing to try. And that's brilliant. It's been brilliant talking to you today, Dorian. I realise that time is just shot on, so I don't want to keep you all day. But let's prioritise protein in our nutrition, get plenty of sleep, build strength. What other things can people do tomorrow that they wasn't doing today to have a better nutrition lifestyle?
Oh, that's an interesting question. So I'll give you a couple of things, because one of them's kind of gnarly, and I kind of mentioned it before. So I didn't talk about, but walking. I think walking in nature is super important, right? Ideally in nature, there have been studies comparing the effect of walking in nature compared to walking in cities, and there is a difference. So walking's good anyway, but like ideally in nature, that will help with that will relax you, that will tap up your parasympathetic nervous system. A huge benefits. I don't think anyone does enough of that really. So getting out in a daily basis, and you can do that tomorrow, right? Walking, dead easy, right? Everyone can walk. You might want to consider looking on your phone where you are in terms of steps, and maybe boosting that by having a goal of boosting that by 1,000 steps. So that's the other thing. But the one thing that I found, and I did touch on it earlier, but it's kind of gnarly, so I'm not sure everyone will do it, but you can definitely do it tomorrow. I found cold water hydrotherapy to be massive for me. I said earlier, so I'm an A-type person. I tend to be a bit obsessive about things. I can tend towards anxiety, right, even before I got ill. And cold water hydrotherapy has genuinely changed that. And we can look at mechanisms as to why, right? When you get that cold water, the initial hit, it turns on your parasympathetic. It's the mammalian dive reflex, right? It's basically reduces your heart rate. It's preparing you for surviving in cold water. If it sounds intimidating, and we're coming into a time of year where it's actually getting a lot harder. If it sounds intimidating, start with a normal shower. Go full cold at the end for 30 seconds. See how you do. See if you can progress. If you get if you like the feeling after that, no one likes the feeling in it, right? I don't like the feeling in it. If you like the feeling after that, you might want to consider doing that as part of your daily routine. If you're not, don't worry about it. Maybe you can work on other things. But I would say those two things. So walking's an easy thing. Cold water shower's a bit of a hard thing. But those two things I found I use with all my clients, and I've personally found it extremely beneficial.
Yeah, and I would just like to add to that: push yourself out of your comfort zone, because
100%.
you know, if even if it's walking, you know, walk a little bit further than you usually would. If it's taking a plunge and going for that cold shower, then do it. If it's lifting those weights, whatever it is, just push yourself out of your comfort zone tomorrow and build in those acute stressors along with your nutrition that we've talked about today. So I'd like to thank you very much, Dorian, for coming on. And just before you go, tell everybody where they can find you. Are you on social media? Have you got a website, anything like that?
Yeah, so I'm on Instagram, so probably that's the best place to get me. That's where I'm most active, at summit_health. You can look me up on Facebook as well, just my name, Dorian Soanes. I have a group on Facebook called Symptom Reversal Formula, but either one of those, and I'm probably most active on Instagram.
Brilliant. Thank you very much for your time today, Dorian.
No problem. Thank you, Matthew.